It's hard to know where to start when recounting the turmoil that has engulfed my life recently. My husband has always been close to his best friend, Laura. She has been a thorn in our marriage, but I never imagined things would escalate to the point they have. The first sign of trouble came when my husband started lying about working overtime. He was actually sneaking off to see Laura. Initially, I feared they were having an affair, but when I confronted him and checked his messages, there was no evidence of infidelity. Instead, he explained that he was spending more time with Laura because she was struggling with the anniversary of her sister's death. This explanation calmed me somewhat, even though I was hurt that he hadn't been honest with me. A few weeks later, my husband invited me to Laura's mother's birthday party. I was looking forward to it, hoping to make new friends and relieve some of my work stress. However, as soon as we arrived, Laura ran to my husband, wrapped herself around his arm, and dragged him off to the garden without even acknowledging me. I felt abandoned, standing alone in a house full of strangers. Fortunately, Laura's mother was kind and made an effort to make me feel welcome. At dinner, Laura asked me to move from my seat next to my husband so she could sit beside him. My husband sided with her, accusing me of being childish and making a scene. Humiliated and angry, I went to the bathroom to compose myself. I messaged my brother for advice, but he thought I was overreacting. Trying to keep the peace, I moved and sat next to Laura's mother. Throughout the dinner, Laura continued to flirt with my husband, touching him and making snide comments towards me. The final straw was when she mocked my portion of food, and my husband laughed along with her. Laura's mother defended me, but Laura ignored her. Devastated, I left the dinner and called my dad to pick me up. He agreed the situation was odd and offered me a place to stay, which I accepted. Back at our house, I received a flood of angry messages from my husband and Laura. My husband blamed me for ruining the dinner, and Laura accused me of being a pick-me, a term I later learned refers to someone who seeks attention and validation. My husband stayed at Laura's that night, which felt like a betrayal. When he finally returned home the next day, I confronted him about leaving me to stay at another woman's house, but he dismissed my feelings and said I needed counseling for my jealousy. Our relationship deteriorated over the following month. My husband became distant and cold, and there was no intimacy between us. He continued to spend time with Laura, which I tried to tolerate, hoping things would improve. However, everything came crashing down when Laura sent me a message with a positive pregnancy test, claiming it was my husband's child and threatening me with divorce. When my husband came home that evening, I confronted him, but he laughed at my distress, which filled me with rage. I began packing his things, and he shouted horrible things at me, but I was too upset to listen. Here are some steps I'm considering to navigate this situation. Seek support. I plan to reach out to friends, family, and possibly a therapist. My dad has been supportive, and professional counseling could help me process my emotions and decide on my next steps. Open communication. I need to have a calm and honest conversation with my husband about how his actions have affected me. Expressing my feelings without accusations might help us understand if there's a chance to repair our relationship. Legal advice. Given the potential infidelity and the pregnancy claim, consulting a lawyer is crucial. They can advise me on my rights and options, especially regarding divorce and its legal implications. Self-care. I must focus on taking care of myself. Engaging in activities that bring me peace and comfort, such as spending time with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, or practicing mindfulness, is essential for my well-being. Boundaries. It's important to establish clear boundaries with my husband and Laura. I need to communicate what behaviors are unacceptable and what I need to feel safe and respected in my relationship. Consider my future. Reflecting on what I want for my future is crucial. I need to consider whether I see a path to reconciliation and trust with my husband, or if separating is the healthier choice for me. Documenting everything that's happening can be helpful for legal purposes and for keeping track of events and my feelings over time. I'll take things one step at a time and remember that it's okay to seek help and prioritize my well-being. This is a challenging period, but I'm determined to navigate it with strength and clarity. My life turned upside down when my husband started sneaking around with his girl best friend, Laura. When Laura sent me a message saying she was pregnant with his child, I was devastated. Our only major problem in our marriage had been his close relationship with her. When I found out he was lying about working overtime to spend time with her, I almost ended our marriage. I suspected they were having an affair but gave my husband the benefit of the doubt. He allowed me to go through their texts and surprisingly, there was no sign of infidelity. He was spending more time with her because it was the anniversary of her sister's death, and Laura always became extremely depressed during this time. Although I was hurt by his dishonesty, I accepted that he was just being a good friend. Things seemed to improve until my husband invited me to Laura's mother's birthday party. I was excited about the chance to make new female friends and hoped to relieve some work stress by socializing. However, when we arrived, Laura immediately ran to my husband, wrapped herself around his arm, and dragged him off to the garden without acknowledging me. My husband didn't come back to get me, so I went to the kitchen for a drink, where Laura's mother welcomed me warmly. The gathering was uneventful until dinner. At dinner, I sat next to my husband, but Laura asked me to move so she could sit next to him. I asked why, pointing out that the only other seat was next to her mother, but she insisted. My husband nodded in agreement, saying I was being childish. I felt my blood boil. It was clear what Laura was doing, and my husband was going along with it. I excused myself, feeling humiliated, and messaged my brother from the bathroom. He said I was overreacting, so I returned to the table and sat next to Laura's mother. The entire time, Laura and my husband were laughing and touching, with Laura making snide comments about my eating habits. Her mother defended me, but Laura ignored her. I felt increasingly isolated and humiliated. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my dad to pick me up and told him everything in the car. He said the situation was odd and offered to let me stay with him for a while. When I got home, I saw messages from my husband and Laura. My husband accused me of ruining the dinner and said he was staying at Laura's for the night. Laura's message was worse. She called me a pick-me, a term that filled me with anger when I looked it up. My husband came home the next day, and when I confronted him about staying at another woman's house, he accused me of overreacting and said I needed counseling for my jealousy issues. For a month, my husband became distant and cold. We barely spoke, and there was no intimacy. He continued visiting Laura once a week, and I bit my tongue, hoping things would improve. Then, Laura sent me a message with a positive pregnancy test, claiming it was my husband's child. I was paralyzed with shock and didn't know how to react. When my husband came home, I confronted him, but he laughed in my face. I was filled with rage and started packing his things, crying uncontrollably. He shouted horrible things at me, including calling me a crazy bitch, which pushed me over the edge. I told him to leave, or I'd involve my dad. He left with the suitcase I packed and a plastic bag of his belongings. After he left, I told my family everything. My brother didn't care, but my father was livid. I felt a mix of regret and determination, but the disrespect I felt for my husband was overwhelming. I texted Laura's mother to inform her of what happened, and she replied the next morning. She explained that the night my husband stayed over, they played a drinking game, and he and Laura were dared to go into a closet, which led to them sleeping together. I was furious and sent Laura a petty message, telling her she could have him and predicting she'd be cheated on too. I took screenshots of her messages and planned to call a lawyer. My husband messaged me, claiming he was sorry and wanted to talk. I agreed to meet him somewhere neutral because I didn't want him in our house. Then, Laura called me, accusing me of cheating on my husband first, which she said justified her actions. I was mortified. She explained that my husband had told her I hit him in a jealous rage and threw his things out the window, which was a complete lie. I never laid a hand on him. I told her the truth. I kicked him out after he disrespected me. Laura confessed that she only liked my husband platonically and was trying to teach me a lesson for supposedly cheating. She admitted to sending the fake pregnancy test to push me to divorce. I showed her the messages my husband sent me, and after a long discussion, we agreed to meet. She was conflicted after realizing her actions were based on his lies. She revealed that my husband had lied to her about me being unfaithful and abusive. She admitted that her pregnancy test message was a scheme to help him leave what she thought was an unhappy marriage. When we met, everything fell into place. Laura showed me recent messages from my husband's second account. He had been telling her I was an abusive cheater who manipulated him financially. He professed his love for her, saying I made his life miserable and she was the only woman he wanted. These messages made me cry, and Laura comforted me. Laura explained that she had agreed to help him out of pity, sending the fake pregnancy test to convince me to divorce him. She had no romantic interest in him and had only wanted to support a friend she believed was in a dire situation. Realizing how manipulative my husband had been, she distanced herself from him. Laura and I agreed to stay in touch, possibly meeting for coffee in the future. She no longer wanted much to do with him, understanding the extent of his deceit. The entire experience left me emotionally drained. My soon-to-be ex-husband had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and his lies had nearly destroyed me. But with Laura's support and the truth finally coming to light, I felt a sense of clarity and closure. Moving forward, I planned to focus on rebuilding my life, free from his toxic influence. Seeking support from friends and family was my immediate priority. My dad had already been a rock, and I intended to lean on him more. Professional counseling could help me process my emotions and guide me through the next steps. Open communication was also crucial. Despite my anger and hurt, I needed to talk to my husband one last time to set boundaries and make our separation official. Legal advice was another critical step. Consulting a lawyer would help me understand my rights and the implications of divorce, especially given the potential infidelity and false accusations. Taking care of myself was equally important. I needed to engage in activities that brought me peace and comfort, such as spending time with loved ones, pursuing hobbies, and practicing mindfulness. Establishing clear boundaries with my husband and Laura was essential. They needed to know what behaviors were unacceptable and what I needed to feel safe and respected. Reflecting on what I wanted for my future was also vital. I had to consider whether there was any path to reconciliation, or if separating was the healthier choice for me. Documenting everything that had happened would be helpful for legal purposes and for keeping track of events and my feelings. Taking things one step at a time and remembering it was okay to seek help and prioritize my well-being were my guiding principles. This was a challenging period, but I was determined to navigate it with strength and clarity. Ultimately, I realized that my husband's actions were not a reflection of my worth but of his own flaws and insecurities. I deserved better, and this ordeal, painful as it was, became a catalyst for reclaiming my life and moving toward a healthier, happier future. Reflecting on everything, I recognized the importance of self-care and healing. I reached out to supportive friends and family members who offered me a safe space to vent and process my emotions. I started journaling daily, which helped me make sense of my feelings and track my progress. I also enrolled in a yoga class, which provided a much-needed physical and mental release. In the midst of this turmoil, I found strength in setting new personal goals. I decided to pursue a hobby I had always been interested in but never had the time for painting. Creating art became a therapeutic outlet for my emotions and a way to reclaim my identity outside of my marriage. As the days passed, I realized how much my husband's betrayal had overshadowed my sense of self-worth. I began to practice self-compassion, reminding myself that his actions were a reflection of his character, not mine. I also started seeing a therapist who helped me work through my feelings of anger, betrayal, and grief. Laura and I continued to communicate. Our relationship transformed from one of suspicion and rivalry to one of mutual understanding and support. She apologized for her role in the deception, and I forgave her, recognizing that she too had been manipulated. We met for coffee several times, sharing our experiences and supporting each other through the healing process. A few weeks later, my husband invited me to Laura's mother's birthday party. I was looking forward to it, hoping to make new friends and relieve some of my work stress. However, as soon as we arrived, Laura ran to my husband, wrapped herself around his arm, and dragged him off to the garden without even acknowledging me. I felt abandoned, standing alone in a house full of strangers. Fortunately, Laura's mother was kind and made an effort to make me feel welcome.